Hi everyone, so today we're going to start lesson 5 of Bootstrap World. You do not need to be logged into WeScheme today. I will do everything that we need to do today, but we are going to hop back and forth between notes and WeScheme. So, defining a value is helpful when a program has lots of identical expressions, like if we wanted 50 green triangles all the same size. But what if a program wants to use 50 green triangles of different sizes? Sometimes a program has expressions that aren't identical, but very similar. We will create a function that will always produce a solid green triangle as the output, or range, but will specifically take in the size as an input, or domain. So the function is always going to produce a solid green triangle, but we get to change the size. We will define a new function called GT for green triangle that takes in one number and always produces a solid green triangle of whatever size we specify. So GT10 would be shortcut for triangle 10 solid green. So GT20 would be the shortcut for triangle 20 solid green. Okay. And then GT180, same exact thing, except instead of 10 or 20, we're using 180. So triangle 180 solid green. Okay. So how to create a design recipe. We would click on the recipe button at the top of WeScheme.org. So when you're in WeScheme in a program, up here it says recipe. So if I click on recipe, it gives us that screen that looks like the screenshot in our notes. So recipe gives us that screenshot. So we see a contract spot at the top, a spot for examples, and then a spot for code. So if we're writing the contract, that's the first thing we have to do. The name of our function is GT. The domain of the function, which in this case is a number, because we want to change the size. And then the range is a solid green triangle, which is an image. So the contract for the GT function would be semicolon GT colon number, because we're changing the size. And after I put in that number, I should get a solid green triangle of whatever that size is. So we get an image. Okay. So step number 2 is to give examples. This programming language provides a special construct called example, which helps you write down how the function is used and what it should compute. So here are 2 examples. So we have example, GT50 should give me a triangle size 50 that is solid green. Another example, GT100 would be a triangle of size 100 that is solid and green. Okay, so in WeScheme, when we do the recipe, we fill in the contract like we just wrote down on the previous page. So GT number image. So the next step is to enter the examples. And you always need 2 examples. So in our 2 GT examples, the code is almost identical except one thing. Circle the only part of the code that changes and give it a label. So if we're looking at these 2 examples here, what is the only thing that's different across them? Hopefully you said the numbers. So I would circle the numbers. So what do those numbers represent about the triangle? It represents the size. So we're going to give that a label as size. okay? So this next part says, can you come up with 2 of your own examples for the function gt? So I basically want you to do exactly what we did up here, but I want you to do it 2 more times. So you can't use 50 and 100, use 2 different ones. So I want you to take a couple minutes, create your 2 examples, and then come back to the video and see if what you did is correct. All right, so my example would be example, parenthesis, gt, some number, so let's say 17. And then we have triangle, whatever your number was that you used, so I used 17, solid, green. Okay, then you should have done the exact same thing on the second line, just with a totally different number. So let's say GT 300. So this would give me triangle 300, solid, green. Okay, so then our third step to the design recipe function is to define the actual function. So after writing the contract, 2 examples, and identifying where the difference in the code occurs, defining the function itself is relatively simple. So now what we're going to do is change the word example to define. Copy everything that stays the same. So basically everything that we did not circle in our example. So if we go back up here, the only thing that we circled was the numbers. So we would copy everything else down because that is going to be consistent. So if you look, the GT, triangle, solid, and green are all written, but the space is where the number would go. And we called those numbers the size of the triangle. So we put the label into the definition, okay? Because we are defining what that space should represent. And that space in this function represents the size of the triangle we are creating, okay? So there's 3 steps to doing the recipe. The first thing is to write the contract, okay? Once you write the contract, we need 2 examples. After you find 2 examples or write 2 examples, we're going to figure out what is different about the examples, what changed. Once we figure out what changes, that's where you give it a label. Okay, and our label here was size. After that, step 3 is to define the function. So the first thing we do is change the word example to define. Then we write everything down that stays the same. After that, you just input the label or the variable that you assigned to the things that changed. Okay? So there is no new homework tonight, but I do want to make sure that you guys are all up to date with where you need to be, especially with our WeScheme work. Check School Tool, check Schoology, make sure that you have all of your work turned in. Okay? And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Have a great day.